I think we are live. I think we're live. Awesome. All right, so I wanted to jump on here and say hello to everyone, first of all. Thanks for tuning in to the live Q&A for Fat for Weight Loss. I'm sorry I haven't actually created any videos recently. The video I did create about the 3 recipes or 3 ingredients for 3 recipes, I am actually creating a cookbook out of that, and so that's coming up very soon. But I had to sort of stop creating videos so that I could make something. Anyway, so that one's going to be live very soon. But firstly, I want to know where you're from. I want to know where you are from. I'm from Brisbane here in Australia, and I see PJB Burke says hello from Texas. Hello from Texas. So I wanted to come on here and sort of talk about some of the stuff that came out of the Low Carb Down Under conference. So Dr. Stephen Finney was there, there was Dave Feldman was there was a whole bunch of really fantastic professors, doctors, clinical dietitians, GPs. There was heaps and heaps of people there, and they were giving some really awesome advice on how to not only deal with people doing the ketogenic diet, but also clearing up some of the misinformation that is not sometimes misrepresented in the ketogenic diet and in the ketogenic community. So it was a fantastic conference to go to, and I want to go over some of the questions that Dr. Steve Finney was asked, and his responses to those, and I think they're really important. I think some of them are beneficial for people with diabetes or with cholesterol or whatever it is. So first of all, the ketogenic diet is basically being in a state of ketosis, right? But what state of ketosis means that you're in ketosis? Like how do you measure that? And so Dr. Steve Finney was saying that it's quite subtle being in the ketogenic diet, and in nutritional ketosis especially, but there's sort of a few numbers that you want to be trying to hit. Now, the way you measure these numbers is, and I'll get to in a second, and how many times and when during the day should you measure these types of things, but I will definitely get to that in a second, but I want to sort of highlight the fact that there are a few numbers that you want to try and hit, but then more doesn't necessarily mean better. And so above 0.5 millimoles per liter is in ketosis. That is in nutritional ketosis, and that's where some of the effective benefits start happening. But the optimum ketone range lies sort of somewhere between that range, 1.5 and 3 millimoles per liter. But anything higher than that, there has been no results, or there's been no evidence to say that being in a higher state of ketosis is necessarily better. So trying to aim for that sort of range, I think, is best. And I think trying to go above 3 millimoles per liter, you either have to be fasting pretty hard, or you have to be taking exogenous ketones. So those values don't necessarily line up to being able to be in a deeper state of ketosis means better. So hopefully that clears something up for some people. Being in a deeper level of ketosis doesn't necessarily mean you're in a better state. Anywhere between 0.5 and that 3 mark. The optimum range is 1.5 to 3, but those levels sort of vary for person to person. And the idea is that the ketogenic diet, you're reducing your carbohydrates so that you're able to flip the master switch of insulin to be able to burn your own fat on your body. So that ketone range is probably the best. So we just say hi to a few people who have tuned in. Hi from Oregon, howdy from Victoria, hello from Cali, Niagara Falls, Savannah, Georgia, Michigan, USA, Tampa, Florida, Pennsylvania, Virginia, Honesdale. Wow, that's so awesome. That's fantastic. And so one of the other questions is can you do the ketogenic diet with type 1 diabetes? And so type 1 diabetes is interesting because you have to substitute all of your insulin through exogenous insulin, right? And so type 1 diabetes, yes, it can be done with a ketogenic diet, but higher levels of ketones can be really dangerous for people with type 1 diabetes because of ketoacidosis, right? So you need to be doing this with your doctor. I know Mike Mutzel from High Intensity Health has a really good interview with a lady who is specifically very good with type 1 diabetes and the ketogenic diet. So have a look on YouTube for that video if you do have type 1 diabetes, or if someone in your family does have type 1 diabetes, to look into that, because the basal insulin range is probably the most important part for that. But obviously reducing your carbohydrates is going to reduce your dependence on insulin. And that was a big thing over the conference as well, is that type 2 diabetes, why should you be eating a whole bunch of carbohydrates but then trying to just supplement that with insulin? So you eat carbohydrates. So for people who are not on a ketogenic diet, they might go and eat a hamburger, and their insulin spikes like their blood sugar spikes like crazy. So they have to inject insulin to be able to bring that down. They inject with bolus insulin, that brings that down. But then they do it again at lunchtime, and same thing at dinner. And so they're just getting more and more and more insulin, and they have to take more and more and more because their body becomes less respondent to it. And so it's sort of this thing that gets really out of control. And so to be able to give people the knowledge on how to rectify that situation for themselves is really important. So by reducing your carbohydrates, you effectively have to take less insulin. So for type 2 diabetes, it's really important that you don't take the same amount of insulin when you are on a ketogenic diet, because it will push you into a hyperglycemic state, and you don't want that. And you have to sort of take carbs to get out of that. So really be talking through this with your doctor about what approach should I take on the ketogenic diet when I do start taking that, and then what how does that affect my medication, those types of things. Eventually you probably want to get off insulin, which is the best thing, but yeah, that's sort of how that approach is for type 2 diabetes. Some people produce less ketones. Actually, I will get to the point where how do you test ketones, how many times a day should you test ketones, and then what time of day should you test ketones. And that is a really important question, because it's different for everyone. Now, the way to find out your differences and when you should test is that you need to be testing 3 times a day at first. Whether you're brand new to the ketogenic diet, whether you've been doing the ketogenic diet for a while, testing 3 times a day will give you an accurate overview of when your ketones are high, when your ketones are low, for you personally. So for some people, your ketones are higher in the morning and lower at night, but the inverse is also the same for some people as well. So their ketones are low in the morning and then higher at night. So you need to find that trend for yourself, and then start measuring that once a day to see whether you're in ketosis or not. So to start out, measure before breakfast, measure before lunch, measure before dinner, and then try and do that for 3 days and see if there's a correlation between any of those values. And if there is, then all you need to do is test once a day. Now, most people say, do you even need to test to know if you're in ketosis? No, you don't, because unless you're doing some type of test, you really don't need to test for ketosis. If you're eating low carb, then you're definitely going to be in a state of ketogenic diet. But the problem is that some people have the carb creep, and the carb creep says the more carbohydrates and the more protein you have, the more insulinogenic response you have, and you're probably going to be kicked out of ketosis. So to make sure that you're in ketosis, maybe testing once a week eventually, or testing once a month. If you know that you're in a pretty solid state and you're eating similar foods, if you feel the same, and trying to achieve that feeling is one of the most important things. So what does it feel like to be in ketosis? For me, I can feel cooling on my skin, on my face. I know that feels like that when I have coconut oil. Your skin, or my skin, can feel quite cool. And so it sort of means that, hey, I'm burning fat, like I can feel this. I know this is definitely a sign that I'm in ketosis, and it's something that I can measure. So you don't need to be testing ketones all the time. But then, for some people, then you just need to test once a day. Carnivore in the ketogenic diet. Okay, so this is a big thing that has risen recently. The carnivore diet and the ketogenic diet are very different. And the carnivore diet, Stephen Finney was saying, where do you get your potassium from? Because there's not a whole lot of potassium, or not enough potassium, that's required in meat that you need to actually perform really well. So well-formulated ketogenic diet is probably one of the most nutrient-rich diets in the world. And so when you're doing a well-formulated ketogenic diet, you have access to all of these green vegetables that have a lot of electrolytes in them, magnesium, which is really important for creating ATP, potassium is, obviously important for an electrolyte, sodium, those types of things. Salt on a carnivore diet, fantastic, but where's the potassium coming from? And so I don't generally recommend going carnivore because it's too restrictive. It is a very restrictive diet, and it's something that I don't think many people need to do. Many people go on the carnivore diet because they're not losing weight on the ketogenic diet, but from what Dr. Rhonda Patrick was saying on the Joe Rogan podcast a little while ago, is that she was saying, can you get the same benefits from fasting that you do from the carnivore diet? Now, I would maybe recommend the carnivore diet for people who have undiagnosed food sensitivities and they haven't been able to figure out what that is. Going carnivore and then reintroducing vegetables in a certain manner may help be able to rectify that, but doing it as a weight loss thing, I just don't think that's possible, and I don't think it's very helpful. Total carbs versus net carbs. So Dr. Stephen Phinney actually counts total carbs, and I think total carbs is probably a really good measure to be in a well-formulated ketogenic diet, because what happens is that when you start tracking net carbs, the net carbs can creep up a lot with the total amount of fiber. Because fiber doesn't get counted, you can eat things like Quest bars, or you can eat things that have a high fiber amount, low net carbs, but ultimately that's not really benefiting you. So I think from the video that I created last week, where you have your plate and you have 50% vegetables, 25% fat, 25% protein, is a really, really easy way to know that you're getting a well-formulated ketogenic diet, because you're eating plenty of vegetables, plenty of fat, and plenty of protein. Now, the amount of protein that you need is around 1.5 grams to 2 grams of protein per kilo of lean mass. And so for me, I know that I'm sitting at around 20% body fat, and so my lean mass is somewhere around 70 kilos. And so for 70 kilos, 140 grams of protein per day. 140 grams of protein per day is actually relatively hard to hit unless you're eating enough protein. So for some people, the problem lies with the ketogenic diet, and the problem lies in their metabolic damage, is they're just simply not eating enough protein. So you need to eat enough protein, not too much, but you need to be eating fat to satiety and making sure your carbs are coming from vegetables, and vegetables that are grown above the ground, berries, seeds, nuts, those types of things. So if anyone has any questions, so Damaris says, where can we find exactly what a well-formulated ketogenic diet looks like? Okay, so I can tell you right now, instead of having to look somewhere else. A well-formulated ketogenic diet is 70 to 75% fat, 5 to 10% carbs, and 15 to 20% protein. There is a relationship between carbohydrates and protein, where if you increase the amount of protein you eat, then you need to decrease the amount of carbs you eat, because they both are insulinogenic, and I definitely wouldn't recommend trying to up your carbs and reduce your protein. If you're eating a lot of protein, then you probably need to eat a pretty low carbohydrate diet. That is to be in a well-formulated ketogenic diet. Well-formulated ketogenic diet comes from whole foods, so all of the nutrients and everything that you need comes from whole foods. It doesn't necessarily come from bars and packets and shakes and things like that, because they are simply macronutrients that have no micronutrients, and when you do that, you're essentially starving your body. So that's from an overview, that is a well-formulated ketogenic diet. The definition of that is different for some people, because their nutritional differences and nutritional deficiencies are different, and so your requirements become different. So for some people, they're deficient in selenium or magnesium, and so you need to be eating a lot of spinach or Brazil nuts or whatever it is. And so that's very, very, very different for some people, and so a well-formulated diet is individual. Now, you can do this and try and do this yourself, and this is fantastic. A lot of people can follow a ketogenic diet simply by eating cheese and hot dogs, but the problem with that is that they're missing out on a lot of micronutrients. So making sure that you're getting the most nutrient dense foods you can for the money is probably the most important way to eat. So well formulated diet means that you need to be eating good quality food. Ken says, what is the best way to determine body fat percentage short of a DEXA scan? Okay, so body impedance scans can actually be pretty accurate as well. They basically measure the electrical impulses between different limbs, and then they can give you a body fat percentage. Now, that's pretty accurate. I think a DEXA scan is much more accurate. DEXA scans can cost $70 here in Australia, but I know that QsCan did a special a few weeks ago where they did, you buy 3 scans for the price of 2. So for $140 you get 3 scans, and you probably do them 8 weeks apart. I'm about to go in a week's time for my last DEXA scan, which ends up being free, which is fantastic. And so, yeah, I mean, like, if you're trying to lose weight, then knowing how much body fat you have and then 8 weeks later measuring that can give you a really good indication of whether you're on the right track. So I definitely recommend doing DEXA scans. Even, you know, it costs $70. It's really important to be able to track that. And again, like if you're losing body, like lean muscle mass along the way, and if you have someone that can sort of, you know, figure out if that's too much or too little for you, I think that's really important. So yeah, I mean, like, I don't think you should be worrying about too much of the cost of a DEXA scan, because yes, they are expensive, but otherwise, what are you measuring against? Now, another thing that is important when you're on a ketogenic diet is being able to take measurements using a tape measure, something like this, is really important, because if your waist is going down, then that's a good thing. If your legs and arms are going down from the fat, then that's a good thing too. If the scale doesn't say anything different, but your tape measurements might be saying something different, then you know that you're not necessarily in a weight loss plateau. So I think that taking measurements is really important on the ketogenic diet. So whether that's a DEXA scan, whether that's doing measurements like this, doing a body impedance scan, they are great as well. Most gyms actually have those. And you can get one of those done, and it gives you a good starting point. So if you know that you did one 8 weeks ago and then you did one now, if you've had a big dramatic change, then it'll show. If you haven't had much of a dramatic change, then it may not show. It's really hard to tell with those things. So Dolka says, can I use coconut sugar while ketogenic? No, you can't use any type of sugar at all, really. The only ones you can use are stevia, erythritol, and monk fruit. Those 3 are the main ones that you can use on the ketogenic diet. I don't recommend using artificial sweeteners, because artificial sweeteners come with a whole host of untested things that no one has found, but could potentially be carcinogenic, could potentially be, you know, it's like, how many carbohydrates does a cigarette have? None. Is it good for you? No. Same thing with artificial sweeteners. It's like, oh, but they don't have any carbs, and it's like, but are they good for you? Probably not. I think that is a good way to think about it. Obviously, if you are in a pinch and you can't avoid it and you have to eat something, and unfortunately it comes with artificial sweeteners, then, you know, go for it. But if avoiding artificial sweeteners, you're going to get much more progress, you're going to get much more results. And again, like, your insulin response is going to come down because your body's not being tricked into having something sweet. Should we be counting net carbs? I think you should be counting total carbs. Now, I don't currently count total carbs, none of my meal plans count total carbs, but from what I found over the conference, I think it's probably more important. So that, I hope that answers that question. Can keto cause you diabetes if stopped? No. So diabetes is a problem with insulin and a problem with blood sugar, right? And so doing a ketogenic diet, if you are a diabetic, is probably one of the most important things you can do, obviously with the supervision of your doctor. But stopping keto won't make you a diabetic, because diabetes is a insulin resistance disease, and you can reverse it by doing a ketogenic diet. So by stopping it, it doesn't mean you get diabetes. It may make you relapse into diabetes potentially. But I hope that answers that question. Terry says, how many total carbs per day? 10% of your daily caloric needs. So if you have now the calculations can be quite difficult to do in your head. So you need to install some type of macro calculator if you need to figure that out. Or I have one on my website. You can just plug your values in, and that gives you the amount of carbs you can eat in a day. Generally, if you try and keep it under 50 grams of total carbs per day, that is good. I hope that answers that question. What is the best time of day to drink apple cider vinegar for weight loss? I don't think apple cider vinegar for weight loss has anything to do with weight loss. I don't believe that apple cider vinegar really helps that much. I think it's more of a placebo effect, unfortunately. But if you do want to drink apple cider vinegar, I believe it's best to do in the mornings and on an empty stomach because it helps regulate your blood sugar. So regulating your blood sugar in turn helps reduce the amount of insulin your body is responding to and can help that way. So Liz says, can you talk about signs of nut intolerance? Sure. Nut intolerances can come from almonds, can come from peanuts, and basically people who have a severe nut intolerance go into anaphylactic shock. Now, for people who don't go into anaphylactic shock, they may get like irritated throat, or they may see that their immune system's slowly degrading. It's the same thing with dairy intolerance. So something that is chronic and something that is slightly elevated in inflammation, like a nut allergy, can be a real problem for digestion and for being able to absorb the nutrients that you actually get from your food, right? And so trying to diagnose a nut allergy can be really hard because nut allergies are, they generally do the prick thing on your hand and they say, oh, okay, this is almonds, and they prick you, and do you have a response? But some people, that response isn't great enough to show on a prick test, and it's actually happening in their gut. And so what I would recommend is, if you think you have a nut allergy, try and remove all nuts, and then bring it back after 30 days. And bring it back one at a time. So bring back almonds, bring back coconut. Now, some people with a nut allergy are also allergic to coconuts, even though it's not a nut, it is a drupe. And so things like seeds can be more beneficial for people who have nut allergies. So removing almonds and replacing it with sesame. So if you're making almond flour bread, then making sesame seed flour bread is probably better. But yeah, elimination is probably the best way to try and do that. I think that's the best thing. Is there anything you are supposed to drink while on keto other than water? No. Ketogenic diet's really simple. Companies try and complicate it for you. So drinking ketones, drinking coffee, drinking bulletproof coffee, all of those things are not necessary. People love it, and people love being able to get added extra fats from things like bulletproof coffee and MCT oil and those things. And I think MCT oil can have a great benefit in energy. I don't think drinking ketones has any benefit for weight loss. It's sort of like drinking sugar for weight loss on a high carb diet. Ketones are energy. They're not a miracle thing. They can be a signaling hormone, but again, like sugar is probably a signaling hormone for insulin. So it's just, you don't need to be drinking anything other than water. Does apple cider vinegar break it fast? Anything that you consume that is not water will break it fast. Anything that has calories in it will break it fast, unfortunately. Two Fit Doctors just did a video on whether apple cider vinegar breaks it fast or not. Interesting. That could be a good video to watch. For some people it may not break it fast, but it's very hard to measure if it's breaking it fast or not. Coffee will break it fast, but for most people just ignore that fact, because 80% of the results come from actually doing a fast. 20% of the results come from being hyper focused about the fast. And so whether you're having coffee, whether you're having apple cider vinegar, all of that stuff really doesn't matter. It's like, look at the 80-20 result of what you're doing. If you're avoiding food for a long time, so for 24 hours, 48 hours, and you're going into autophagy and you're trying to get the benefits from fasting, that is going to happen whether you're drinking coffee or not. You know, you may get an extra 20% of the results by not drinking coffee, but ultimately what is going to help you do the fast, what is going to get you through it, I think that's more important. 3 Fit Docs just posted a great video on this. 2 Fit Docs, 3 Fit Docs, okay. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump off. There's heaps more stuff in this book that I'll probably cover next week. I've got like 20 pages of notes. And I strongly believe that getting information out to people who need it is really important, because a lot of people really suffer with a lot of inflammation diseases, and a lot of people don't understand the role of cholesterol or the lipid system in the body, and so people shouldn't necessarily be charging a lot of money like some conferences do, and so I want to be able to get that information out to people for free. And by all means, the Low Carb Down Under conference is going to be on YouTube very, very soon, which is awesome. So I'm just going to be bringing you the information. Like, there was a lot of really complicated information in that conference as well, and I'm trying to bring it down into a simpler version for you so that you can understand it, and apply it in a practical way, because sometimes having too much information can cause information paralysis, and you don't end up doing anything because you go, I don't know whether I should be drinking coffee or apple cider vinegar during a fast. Like, what's the best way? It's like, just do the fast and worry about that stuff later. Same with the ketogenic diet. Start the ketogenic diet and worry about the complications. Not the complications, but obviously all of this needs to be checked with your doctor, your dietitian, your clinical practitioner first. But worry about all the small things later, because ultimately at the end, like, they don't matter that much. Being in a ketogenic diet, reducing your carbohydrates is possibly the only thing that matters. So I hope that really helps, and I hope that gets some of the information across in a really simple way for most people, because I think that's more important than trying to really dig down and say, hey, these little things are causing you to be kicked out of ketosis, because it's producing enzymes in your liver like coffee does that creates blah 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 blah, and you're like, the main benefit is reducing the carbohydrates, keeping the healthy fat, and eating real food. So just do that and you'll be fine. Again, my name is Aaron. Thank you so much for sticking around, and I will be talking to you next week.